Today, we've invited a black belt psychiatrist to help us find our way out of this parenting maze. He's known worldwide as a critic of permissive upbringing and thinks we shouldn't treat kids like small adults. And this one's interesting, to also take parenting easy. Please welcome David Eberhard from Stockholm.
Hi.
Hi, David. Welcome to Brain Bar and TribeWIRE Live.
Thank you. Thank you.
So
it's nice to take part in this.
Good. So I know that you have a lot of kids, but I kind of lost track exactly how many.
I have 9 kids, but 2 are adults. The oldest one is 23. And the youngest one is 1 year old in a week's time. So he'll turn 1 next week after that.
So it's safe to say, besides your studies, you have experience in the field, so to speak.
Yeah.
That's good to know. It's good to know.
Yeah.
You don't always want to ask people that don't have experience in the area. So what do you get? What do you think most of us get wrong about parenting?
I think, like you introduced me, I would say one of the things that we tend to, especially in Sweden, I don't know how it is. It differs a lot between different countries, obviously, but we have a tendency to be too permissive. And I think the permissive upbringing style it sounds really good. It seems it's you're a good guy. I'm the friend of my kids, but you're not a friend. They have other friends. They don't need parents as being their friends. They need guidance, etc. So I think that's one main problem today. But if you go back 100 years in time, it was the opposite problem. So it changes over time.
Did you discover this on kid number 7?
No. Really, the reason why I wrote this book a couple of years ago, How Children Took the Power, which is about permissive upbringing and upbringing as a whole, really. But the reason why I wrote the book from the beginning was that I wrote another book a couple of years earlier called In the Land of the Security Junkies, which is about really how the safer we get, the safer the society gets, the more unsecure people are feeling. And that I noticed in very many different areas. Among one of those were upbringing, but also in my field, my line of work as a psychiatrist, I noticed I was the head of the psychiatric emergency ward, the biggest Stockholm County psychiatric emergency ward at the time. And I noticed that young people were seeking help for less and less severe problems. They were seeking help because their girlfriend broke up or their dog died, or things that I think another very well-known psychologist, Jonathan Haidt, wrote a book some years ago also with the same topic. It's called I forgot the cuddling of the American mind. So this was the reason why I started to get interested in what happens when you're adult after a permissive upbringing, and you get everything you point at. The kid decide where to go on vacation. The kid decides what to eat, when to go to bed, etc., etc. What happens with these kids? Because when they are kids, they are really happy. You can see that in surveys in Sweden, and compared with other countries. We have very happy kids in Sweden, but we have very sad young adults and very sad teenagers.
Okay. So I would say the situation is now with the quarantine is kind of escalating potentially. But before we get into that, I just want to let our audience to be aware that during the discussion, let us know what you think in the comment section. And from time to time, we'll take a break and discuss your questions with David. So So David, so right now, what new family routines might help us deal with the situation we're in?
I would say the situation you are in. We are not in that situation in Sweden, as you may know, since we're not totally locked down. But the situation you are in, I would suggest that you look at the family. It's not a democracy. Many people know this, but it's sort of like a corporation where you have the head of the corporation decides. Obviously, sometimes it's a better strategy to discuss whatever you should do, but let there be no doubt that the parents are the ones that are calling the shots.
So it's not a benevolent dictatorship.
Maybe not dictatorship as a whole, but benevolent. That's a difficult English word.
It's a tough word even for me today. So,
but yeah, some obviously yes. The problem is that we have had a situation where the kids decide more and more and more, and at the same time, at least in Sweden, we have the situation where we treat our kids as if they are really competent in matters where they are totally incompetent, like discussing politics, discussing sexual orientation, etc., etc. And then at the same time, in Sweden, we treat the kids as they are non-competent where they really are competent, like going by. That's not the case in a total lockdown, but we don't let our kids go to school by themselves, which they easily can do from 6 or 7 years old age. So we sort of twisted it all around. And obviously, if you live in a lockdown, this will be very much more into your face.
So what can we do?
Excuse me?
Can you give us a couple of maybe things that we can do while we're in this situation as a family to deal with, yes, I understand the hierarchy, but like, what can we do to have good results for both the kids and the parents?
I think on one hand, this is a perfect situation where there's nothing bad that hasn't got some good side effects, and normally, despite what I said about kids that are permissive, have permissive upbringing, they have great expectations on life, which really they get to become very disappointed when they get older because they didn't get what everybody told them to get. But on the same side, if you look at the research on how much our impact is on our kids, it's really quite small. If you compare to other, I would say nearly all research, whatever traits you look at, it's around 50% genetics and then 50% environmental factors. Sometimes it's 70% genetics, but never less than around 50%. But the interesting thing is, what are those environmental factors? Because that's not only how you act as a mom or a dad. It's a lot of other stuff that take place in these 50%. And a lot of it is pure coincidence, pure things we do not have any impact on whatsoever, like infectious diseases, etc., etc. But the one factor that really there's a lot of research showing have a huge impact on why our kids end up the way they do is peers. It seems really like peers have more impact than parents in very many ways. So this is a situation where they don't have peers for a long time.
Exactly.
So that would suggest that you have really more impact on your kids in this situation. It may be, I'm not sure, but that would tell you that you do have things that you can change for your kids better, easier when you don't have you don't have the peers ruining your upbringing.
Yeah. So what are a few things we could actually do to create a better impact for our kids now?
I would say you have a situation where you can teach social adjustments, teach them how to behave in a better way, which is easier when you don't have the peers, and that's really a factor that is not a trait. It's the effect of a trait. So normally you do have impact. That you can see that very easily. That if you are well reared, you can behave. You can say. You say thank you for the food, for the dinner. You behave in those sort of social code things. Those things you do have a perfect situation to teach your kid those the way to behave. And also, I would say you do have more time with your kids now, which also makes it easier. A lot of parents find it, including me, it's much easier that I cook the food. It's much easier that I do this than to ask my kids to take part. But this is the situation when you're in a lockdown where you really can use the time to do things together, normal things, not playing. Parents, at least in Sweden, they I want to play with my kids. That's very important. But I find that's not important. It's important to teach your kids how to wash their clothes, how to cook food, how to do stuff, and you have a perfect situation for that.
Well, that being said, we just got a comment from an audience member, Esther, and she wants to know when can we start helping kids to make their own decisions, or how do we go about doing that?
Upbringing
in a lockdown situation.
In the lockdown situation, it's easier because you spend more time with your kids, and I would say all upbringing is brainwashing. That's what we do. That's what upbringing is, and you may like it or you may dislike it, but that's the way. So I would say you start from the beginning. If you want that, if you want a kid that makes own decisions, yeah, of course you can start from the beginning. If you want the kid to be obedient, you start from the beginning with that.
So where, what's that fine line between obedience and an obnoxious kid?
That's a fine line, and there's no research saying what you should do as a parent. You probably know your kids better than all the experts, including me. So you cannot really say that this is too obedient or this is he's too obnoxious. Obviously, if you pass the line very much, you can absolutely tell it. But
okay. So what are some of the things that we've traditionally done as a family? Like what can we drop now? What can we get rid of? Is there anything we can get rid of now that we're in a lockdown? Like behaviors that may not be good for us as a family?
That's a tough question because there's always things that you can get rid of, but it's a question that the parent themselves need to answer because it may differ so much. I have a tendency to shout a lot sometimes, and that's that you need to not be so raise your voice too much. I think, even though I don't think any kid will end up being marked for life because their parents lost their temper sometimes. Okay. But obviously, if you live in a very close closed lockdown situation, it's you need to think more about it, I would say.
Okay. Well, that's a good thing to lose, and
yeah, of course.
Probably a good thing to maybe keep away. Just let that go.
All the time, obviously. Yeah.
So how can we spend, when we're in this situation and we have schooling going on, which we'll do shortly, but how can we spend meaningful time with our kids? Like what do they really need right now? What do you think the kids are craving, for their development?
I lost your question there for a short while.
That's okay. How do we spend meaningful time with our kids now? And what do they really need, at this point in their development? And, some kids are, younger, so, 4 or 5, some are 7 and 8, some are 10 and 12, et cetera. But just trying to understand, like, what can we do for our kids now to make the best of this situation?
I think to involve them more in domestic work, because that's like I said, and obviously one of the main problems here is when the kids don't go to school, you need to be the teacher, and not only domestic work, but you need to do math. The kids that are in 3rd grade or 4th grade or whatever, you need to take part. You need to become their teacher, because no one else are going to teach them, and then you have a lot of time to. I don't know how much you can work from home, so that's another problem, that you need to work, but you are sitting in your own home. Sorry. but at the same time, you need to become their teacher. You need to socialize them and teach them domestic things, etc., etc. And you need to don't lose your temper because you're in your knees all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. All right. We have another comment coming in. It's Sid's comment. So, how can we be good parents, especially if we're feeling really tense and anxious?
It's obviously difficult if you're really anxious to be a good parent. I think the best way to be a good parent in this situation is trying as much as possible not to let the kids feel your anxiousness, even though it's impossible at time to time. And also say to yourself, it's okay. It depends on the age of the kid, naturally, but tell them this is a tough time. These are difficult times, and dad or mom, I'm feeling tense, and it's okay. You can obviously. I would say it's not very different from being the boss like I am the boss of a huge clinic in Stockholm, and I need, even if it's 10 times at my work, because we have a lot of patients and a lot of directives that come all the time, and people are sick. Very many people are on sick leave because you can't cough one time, because then you can't go to work. So and that's the same situation. I need, as a parent, to hold their anxiousness and try. You are the boss of your family. You need to look at yourself as the boss of the family. As a boss, you need to, I don't know the English word for it, but you need to sort of take that from the kids as much as possible. But obviously, if you are tensious and anxious and tense, you need to say that's not a problem. You can do that.
Yeah, well, fair enough. It's good to be honest with your kid in that situation, but we did get a question in. It looks like Vane asked this question, or Vane, and it's what can parents do to lower their anxiety just on a daily basis so that they don't pass it on to their kids?
Yeah, first of all, as I said, I think the best thing is if you try to avoid things. This is very well known from cognitive behavioral therapy. If you try to avoid certain things, I can't think about this, I can't think about this, I can't talk about it, then it gets worse. Mm-hmm. So you have to be realistic. And obviously, I think it's easier for the kids to cope if they know, okay, these are difficult times. You can talk. In that's a situation where kids often are more competent than we give them the benefit of. We tend to find them very incompetent when it comes to those kind of matters, but they don't necessarily. It's not necessarily so. Mm-hmm. It's obviously on the kid and on the age in some ways, but
okay. So our kids, they're homeschooling right now. Yeah. They're I mean, we're pretty regimented at this house in our schooling schedule. But I guess it's based on each individual school in most cases. So, do you think homeschooling is going to stay with us when this pandemic is over?
I hope not.
Okay. Why?
No, because it depends. I am not really familiar with how you do the homeschooling. Is it up to the parents totally, or do you have some digital education?
I think it varies from school to school. In our situation, we're getting assignments daily, and the kids are talking to their teacher daily in a Zoom group meeting at the end of the day, and there's a fair amount of work going on. It's not, it's definitely fairly regimented. And this isn't even a regular public school. This is more of a alternative type school. So yeah.
It depends a little bit on the school, but like if it's all up to the parents, obviously that's not a good thing, because parents need to do other things.
Right.
Maybe, like I said, there's no bad thing that has some good side effects, and one side effect of it may be that not homeschooling. I don't think so. I think that's not a good thing in the long run. But maybe that you end up using digital thing help. It may in some ways end up good.
Creating a hybrid of regular education as we used to recognize it, along with some digital education, some tools to bring in to complement education.
Yeah. That may be good. I'm not a fan of too much digital education, since I think when you look at it, and I wrote about that also in How Children Took the Power, when it comes to research on education methods, it seems like most modern versions of it, like problem-based learning, etc., which is not digital, but it's sort of a more, you shouldn't teach knowledge. The kids should find it themselves. Those kind of educational strategies doesn't seem to have that much evidence. Not more evidence than what really has evidence, and that might be a good thing to take with you in a lockdown as a home teaching parent. It's always following up on things.
So following up on what the kids are learning to understand.
Obviously, you can have grades. Like, that's a good thing to have a grade all the time, because if you follow it up, you have grades on tests, etc. They know what they know and they know what they don't know. Mm-hmm. So you can't really have that. Maybe you could do that at home. So you find out a test for them to see, so they can sort of compete with themselves and know where they are. Okay, that's one way to do it.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned a little bit about screen time earlier. So what do you think? How many hours a day is good, or how many hours a week, or how many minutes?
Screen time is really interesting. They've done some really interesting research on screen time, and it seems, at least from I mentioned Jonathan Haidt, mm-hmm. It seems like the young boys that tend to have more screen time, computer gaming, etc. Mm-hmm. It does not seem to have that bad impact on their psychiatric development. What it does have impact on is obviously that they don't move around enough and they get fat but what does have much more impact is social media, which tend to be the girls that are on social media. And that is, I would say, that I would warn a little bit about. But computer games, it's not that bad. I think I think there's not so much evidence saying that this is really bad with computer games. The problem with computer games is there's two problems with computer games. Mm-hmm. One is you don't exercise enough, and the main problem is it's too fun. You never quit, so you end up, and it's annoying. I know for myself, it's really annoying for a parent. So I think when you're in a lockdown, it's not only to focus on how are the kids feeling. You must also think, how are you feeling as a parent? Mm-hmm. Because you get irritated because your kids, as I do, I get really irritated when they sit and they don't do things that I think that they should do. It makes me irritated, and you need to be in control. My oldest kids, we had a contract when it came to, and I that's a good suggestion. It worked out really well. We had certain days they were not allowed to play computer games or screen time at all. And then I think we had 1 hour. You can sit by the screen 1 hour. You can obviously, it's up to the parent. But the thing is that was really easy to, because I thought my kids this was 10 years ago or 15 years ago nearly. And they were playing too much on the computer, and it was really easy when you have a 10-year-old. It's really easy as a parent to say, "Okay, I set the rules here." Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But if you start with that when they're 15 or 16, you don't have a chance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I've understood that by the kids not getting the exercise and not getting the oxygen and the blood pumping, reading levels kind of go down as well, especially in boys. Or that's at least what I understand.
That's another problem. It's when you look at the data, you mm-hmm. can see boys are failing in school, but they are not depressed and anxious like the girls. So when I talked about it, social media, I say, okay, it's have a bad impact on girls mm-hmm. more, but the bad impact may also be that you're failing in school. So you need to take that into account as well. And that happens to the boys, not the girls.
Okay. So we did get a question, and it from Peter. It's still about homeschooling, and the question was. I'm just going to rephrase it a little bit just to help out with the conversation. Are there elements of homeschooling that might work better than traditional schools? In terms of the potential of maybe some of the things are taught at home, some of the things are taught at school?
Obviously, it depends on the parent and how well trained the parent or how well how good the parent is, but the reason why we have teachers is that they should be well trained to be teachers. I think in Sweden, I don't know how it is in other countries. In Sweden, we have a problem that a lot of teachers, it's really easy to become a teacher. It has no high, what do you say, you don't get, it used to be a job where you were very put on a pedestal and you were sort of, it had a high, what's
a high bar. There was a high bar and there was a...
Yeah. Difficult. But now it isn't. It was difficult and it was a fine job. Mm-hmm. Now we don't have that. And with this trend that you see a lot of in the Western countries, at least, that knowledge, the postmodernism has changed it. So knowledge is not interesting anymore because they say, okay, just look it up on Wikipedia. This is a problem, I think, mm-hmm. because if you have schools that are of that sort, homeschooling may very well be much better. So it depends on the parent. Okay,
so let's move to the social consequences of being in lockdown. I know that there's been like social effects kind of rising in terms of more divorces, in terms of incidents of domestic violence. How do we, how do we deal with that right now? How do we try to ease those indicators?
I think that's a very difficult question because I don't think we can really deal with that. Because that's a consequence of you. Normally, if you go to work, you don't see each other as much as you do now, and obviously, if you see each other after being married for 10 years and you get really annoyed with each other, because normally you don't. So I think this is a consequence that is really hard to. I don't think the society can go. Obviously, the society would be. It's very important that we are focused and know that this may be the case in a lot of families. Mm-hmm. But it's hard to find a strategy. Also, it falls back on the parents. You need to be adults. If you end up with someone that you don't really want to end up with anymore, and then maybe the best consequence would be divorce after a while. I don't know, but it's difficult to sort of, that would be social engineering. That's something we did we've been really good in Sweden of social engineering, and I'm not a fan of it.
Mm-hmm. What do you think? What do you think about this situation can actually bring families closer together?
Yeah, I think the same things that we discussed earlier in the show, that you do have the possibility to, if you do like each other in the first place, obviously it's a good thing to be able to stay together and do things together, which normally our way of life makes that really difficult because people go to work, etc. So obviously this is either you end up arguing, quarreling, maybe in the worst case domestic violence, etc. But on the other hand, you have families that are totally different that may find that they get closer together as well. But that's not so easy to measure. So what you see of this, you see the bad parts, because then you can see that in Wuhan people got divorced, etc. But you don't see if they actually like each other more. So it's difficult to know.
Okay. So after the quarantine, when that gets removed for us, how do you think? Well, at first, what about a situation that's very stressful, a family that's dealing with domestic violence? What can ease that? Do you think just the quarantine easing will ease the family stress, or will it still be there?
It depends. If you have a situation where you did live together side by side, not together really, but by side, and that worked well, and then you end up in a lockdown where it may be as bad as this is a situation where you end up hitting each other, then obviously it's not going to go away after the quarantine.
Right.
In many cases, at least, I think that will have a very bad impact after the quarantine as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So moving forward after the quarantine, how can families fully, have a better relationship with each other once this quarantine is lifted? If you could just, we just have a few more minutes, but I just want to know that.
But by being, you should never accept domestic violence. That's not what I'm saying. But if you have quarrels and you have sort of fights and verbal fights together, you need to, after the quarantine, be big enough to say, okay, this was a stressful situation. Let's move on, and maybe do that, or maybe not.
Okay, I wasn't at this point. I'm not talking about domestic violence. I'm just talking about families in general moving forward. The things are going to go back to normal, so to speak. So what happens then?
Yeah, it depends. I think what happens then is obviously it has to do with what really had happened, what happened during the lockdown. But that's what I was aiming at, was saying that, okay, you need to forgive each other if you, and that's what I said, we're not talking domestic violence here, we're talking just normal fights, normal quarrels. You need to forgive each other, or at least try to. And then you need as soon as possible to get things back to normal.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, well, thank you, David. I want to thank our audience for being here with us today at Brain Bar TribeWIRE Live, and thank you, David, for taking the time to share your perspective.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. Don't forget to tune in next Tuesday for the next episode of TribeWIRE Live. That one will be in Hungarian. The founder of Booker Kids, Dorka Horvath, will tell us about digital tales and the future of storytelling. I encourage you to join the Brain Bar community on Facebook to discuss your experiences with others, and subscribe to our newsletter at brainbar.com to read about new trends, interesting opinion pieces, and trustworthy analysis twice a week in your mailbox. Thank you for joining us, and see you soon. Thank you, David.
Thank you.